I am going to the Parliament. You understand this bag. If you have any business depending there, be short, and let me hear it, and pay your fees. Little French lawyer. Shall you be able to carry this honest fellow's cause for him? Said Mannering. Why, I don't know, the battle is not to the strong, but he shall come off triumphant over Jock of Dawston if we can make it out. I owe him something. It is the pest of our profession that we seldom see the best side of human nature. People come to us with every selfish feeling newly pointed and grinded, they turn down the very caulkers of their animosities and prejudices, as smiths do with horses' shoes in a white frost. Many a man has come to my garret yonder, but I have at first longed to pitch out at the window, and yet, at length, have discovered that he was only doing as I might have done in his case, being very angry, and, of course, very unreasonable. I have now satisfied myself that if our profession sees more of human folly and human roguery than others, it is because we witness them acting in that channel in which they can most freely vent themselves. In civilized society, law is the chimney through which all that smoke discharges itself that used to circulate through the whole house, and put everyone's eyes out. No wonder, therefore, that the vent itself should sometimes get a little sooty. But we will take care our Liddesdale man's cause is well conducted and well argued, so all unnecessary expense will be saved. He shall have his pineapple at wholesale price. Will you do me the pleasure, said Mannering, as they parted, to dine with me at my lodgings? My landlord says he has a bit of red deer venison, and some excellent wine. Venison, answered the counsellor alertly, but presently added, but no. It's impossible, and I can't ask you home neither. Monday's a sacred day, so's Tuesday and Wednesday, we are to be heard in the great Tane case in presence, but stay, it's frosty weather, and if you don't leave town, and that venison would keep till Thursday. You will dine with me that day? Under certification. Well, then, I will indulge a thought I had of spending a week here, and if the venison will not keep, why, we will see what else our landlord can do for us. Oh, the venison will keep, said Playdell, and now goodbye. Look at these 2 or 3 notes, and deliver them if you like the addresses. I wrote them for you this morning. Farewell. My clerk has been waiting this hour to begin a DD information. And away walked Mr. Playdell with great activity, diving through closes and ascending covered stairs, in order to attain the High Street by an access, which, compared to the common route, was what the Straits of Magellan are to the more open, but circuitous passage round Cape Horn. On looking at the notes of introduction which Playdell had thrust into his hand, Mannering was gratified with seeing that they were addressed to some of the first literary characters of Scotland. To David Hume, Esq. To John Home, Esq. To Dr. Ferguson. To Dr. Black. To Lord Kames. To Mr. Hutton. To John Clerk, Esq. Of Eldon. To Adam Smith, Esq. To Dr. Robertson. Upon my word, my legal friend has a good selection of acquaintances. These are names pretty widely blown indeed. An East Indian must rub up his faculties a little, and put his mind in order, before he enters this sort of society. Mannering gladly availed himself of these introductions, and we regret deeply it is not in our power to give the reader an account of the pleasure and information which he received, in admission to a circle never closed against strangers of sense and information, and which has perhaps at no period been equaled, considering the depth and variety of talent which it embraced and concentrated. Upon the Thursday appointed, Mr. Playdell made his appearance at the inn where Colonel Mannering lodged. The venison proved in high order, the claret excellent, and the learned counsel, a professed amateur in the affairs of the table, did distinguished honor to both. I am uncertain, however, if even the good cheer gave him more satisfaction than the presence of Dominie Sampson, from whom, in his own juridical style of wit, he contrived to extract great amusement, both for himself and 1 or 2 friends whom the colonel regaled on the same occasion. The grave and laconic simplicity of Sampson's answers to the insidious questions of the barrister placed the bonhomie of his character in a more luminous point of view than Mannering had yet seen it. Upon the same occasion he drew forth a strange quantity of miscellaneous and abstruse, though, generally speaking, useless learning. The lawyer afterwards compared his mind to the magazine of a pawnbroker, stowed with goods of every description, but so cumbrously piled together, and in such total disorganization, that the owner can never lay his hands upon any one article at the moment he has occasion for it. As for the advocate himself, he afforded at least as much exercise to Samson as he extracted amusement from him. When the man of law began to get into his altitudes, and his wit, naturally shrewd and dry, became more lively and poignant, the dominie looked upon him with that sort of surprise with which we can conceive a tame bear might regard his future associate, the monkey, on their being first introduced to each other. It was Mr. Pleydell's delight to state in grave and serious argument some position which he knew the dominie would be inclined to dispute. He then beheld with exquisite pleasure the internal labor with which the honest man arranged his ideas for reply, and tasked his inert and sluggish powers to bring up all the heavy artillery of his learning for demolishing the schismatic or heretical opinion which had been stated, when, behold, before the ordnance could be discharged, the foe had quitted the post, and appeared in a new position of annoyance on the dominie's flank or rear. Often did he exclaim prodigious, when, marching up to the enemy in full confidence of victory, he found the field evacuated, and it may be supposed that it cost him no little labor to attempt a new formation. He was like a native Indian army, the colonel said, formidable by numerical strength and size of ordnance, but liable to be thrown into irreparable confusion by a movement to take them in flank. On the whole, however, the dominie, though somewhat fatigued with these mental exertions, made it unusual speed and upon the pressure of the moment, reckoned this one of the white days of his life, and always mentioned Mr. Pleydell as a very erudite and facetious person. By degrees the rest of the party dropped off, and left these three gentlemen together. Their conversation turned to Mrs. Bertram's settlements. "Now what could drive it into the noddle of that old harridan," said Pleydell, "to disinherit poor Lucy Bertram, under pretence of settling her property on a boy who has been so long dead and gone? I ask your pardon, Mr. Samson. I forgot what an affecting case this was for you. I remember taking your examination upon it, and I never had so much trouble to make anyone speak 3 words consecutively. You may talk of your Pythagoreans, or your silent Brahmins, Colonel, go to, I tell you this. Learned gentleman beats them all in taciturnity, but the words of the wise are precious, and not to be thrown away lightly." "Of a surety," said the dominie, taking his blue-checked handkerchief from his eyes, "that was a bitter day with me indeed, aye, and a day of grief hard to be borne, but he giveth strength who layeth on the load." Colonel Mannering took this opportunity to request Mr. Pleydell to inform him of the particulars attending the loss of the boy, and the counsellor, who was fond of talking upon subjects of criminal jurisprudence, especially when connected with his own experience, went through the circumstances at full length. "And what is your opinion upon the result of the whole?" "Oh, that Kennedy was murdered. It's an old case which has occurred on that coast before now, the case of smuggler versus exciseman." "What then is your conjecture concerning the fate of the child?" "Oh, murdered too, doubtless," answered Pleydell. "He was old enough to tell what he had seen, and these ruthless scoundrels would not scruple committing a second Bethlehem massacre if they thought their interest required it." The dominie groaned deeply, and ejaculated, "Enormous!" "Yet there was mention of gypsies in the business too, counsellor," said Mannering, "and from what that vulgar-looking fellow said after the funeral." "Mrs. Margaret Bertram's idea that the child was alive was founded upon the report of a gypsy," said Pleydell, catching at the half-spoken hint. "I envy you the concatenation, Colonel. It is a shame to me not to have drawn the same conclusion. We'll follow this business tip instantly. Here, hark ye, waiter, go down to Lucky Woods in the Cowgate. You'll find my clerk-driver. He'll be set down to high jinks by this time, for we and our retainers, Colonel, are exceedingly regular in our irregularities. Tell him to come here instantly, and I will pay his forfeits." "He won't appear in character, will he?" said Mannering. "Ah! No more of that, Hal, and thou lovest me," said Pleydell. "But we must have some news from the land of Egypt, if possible." Oh, if I had but hold of the slightest thread of this complicated skein, you should see how I would unravel it. I would work the truth out of your bohemian, as the French call them, better than a monitoire, or a plainte d'éternel. I know how to manage a refractory witness. While Mr. Playdell was thus vaunting his knowledge of his profession, the waiter re-entered with Mr. Driver, his mouth still greasy with mutton pies, and the froth of the last draught of 2 penny yet unsubsided on his upper lip. With such speed had he obeyed the commands of his principal Dutch driver, "You must go instantly and find out the woman who was old Mrs. Margaret Bertram's maid. Inquire for her everywhere, but if you find it necessary to have recourse to protocol, quid the tobacconist, or any other of these folks, you will take care not to appear yourself, but send some woman of your acquaintance. I dare say you know enough that may be so condescending as to oblige you. When you have found her out, engage her to come to my chambers tomorrow at 8 o'clock precisely." "What shall I say to make her forthcoming?" asked the aide-de-camp. "Anything you choose," replied the lawyer. "Is it my business to make lies for you, do you think? But let her be in presentia by 8 o'clock, as I have said before." The clerk grinned, made his reverence, and exit. "That's a useful fellow," said the counselor. "I don't believe his match ever carried a process. He'll write to my dictating 3 nights in the week without sleep, or, what's the same thing, he writes as well and correctly when he's asleep as when he's awake. Then he's such a steady fellow. Some of them are always changing their alehouses, so that they have 20 caddies sweating after them, like the bare-headed captains traversing the taverns of Eastcheap in search of Sir John Falstaff. But this is a complete fixture. He has his winter seat by the fire, and his summer seat by the window, in Lucky Woods, betwixt which seats are his only migrations. There he's to be found at all times when he is off duty. It is my opinion he never puts off his clothes or goes to sleep. Sheer ale supports him under everything. It is meat, drink, and clothing, bed, board, and washing." "And is he always fit for duty upon a sudden turn-out?" "I should distrust it, considering his quarters." "Oh, drink never disturbs him, Colonel. He can write for hours after he cannot speak. I remember being called suddenly to draw an appeal case. I had been dining, and it was Saturday night, and I had ill will to begin to it. However, they got me down to Claryhucka's, and there we sat burling till I had a fair tap-pit hen, *C note 6. Tap-pit hen under my belt, and then they persuaded me to draw the paper. Then we had to seek driver, and it was all that 2 men could do to bear him in, for, when found, he was, as it happened, both motionless and speechless. But no sooner was his pen put between his fingers, his paper stretched before him, and he heard my voice, than he began to write like a scrivener, and, excepting that we were obliged to have somebody to dip his pen in the ink, for he could not see the standish, I never saw a thing scrolled more handsomely." "But how did your joint production look the next morning?" said the Colonel. "Way. Capital, not 3 words required to be altered, *C note 7. Convivial habits of the Scottish bar. It was sent off by that day's post. But you'll come and breakfast with me tomorrow, and hear this woman's examination?" "Why, your hour is rather early." "Can't make it later. If I were not on the boards of the outer house precisely as the 9 hours bell rings, there would be a report that I had got an apoplexy, and I should feel the effects of it all the rest of the session." "Well, I will make an exertion to wait upon you." Here the company broke up for the evening. In the morning Colonel Mannering appeared at the councillor's chambers, although cursing the raw air of a Scottish morning in December. Mr. Playdell had got Mrs. Rebecca installed on one side of his fire, accommodated her with a cup of chocolate, and was already deeply engaged in conversation with her. "Oh no, I assure you, Mrs. Rebecca, there is no intention to challenge your mistress's will, and I give you my word of honor that your legacy is quite safe. You have deserved it by your conduct to your mistress, and I wish it had been twice as much." Why, to be sure, sir, it's no right to mention what is said before ain't ye heard how that dirty body quid cast up to me the bits o' compliments he jide me, and telled her again ony loose cracks, asterisk gossip, I might hae had wy him, now if ane was talking loosely to your honour, there's nae saying what might come out. I assure you, my good Rebecca, my character and your own age and appearance are your security, if you should talk as loosely as an amatory poet. Aweel, if your honour thinks I am safe, the story is just this, ye see, about a year ago, or no just as sae lang, my leddy was advised to go to Gilsland for a while for her spirits were distressing her sair. Ellangowan's troubles began to be spoken on publicly, and sair vexed she was, or she was proud o' her family. For Ellangowan himsel and her, they sometimes agreed, and sometimes no, but at last they didn't agree at a 4 twa or 3 year, for he was I wanting to borrow siller, and that was what she couldn't abided no hand, and she was I wanting it paid back again, and that the laird he liked as little. So, at last, they were clean aff edgether. And then some of the company at Gilsland tells her that the estate was to be selled, and ye wot hae thought she had ta'en an ill will at Miss Lucy Bertram frae that moment, for mony a time she cried to me, oh Becky, if that useless peenging thing o' a lassie there, at Ellangowan, that canna keep her near do will father within bounds if she had been but a lad bairn, they couldna hae selled the auld inheritance for that fool body's debt, and she would rin on that way till I was just wearied and sick to hear her ban the puir lassie, as if she wadna hae been a lad bairn, and keep it the land, if it had been in her will to change her sect. And ae day at the Spaywell below the Craig at Gilsland, she was seeing a very bonny family o' bairns, they belonged to Ane Macroskie, and she broke out, is not it an odd like thing that ilka wafcarlf, asterisk every insignificant churl in the country has a son and heir, and that the house of Ellangowan is without male succession? There was a gypsy wife stood a hint and heard her a muckle stour, asterisk strong, fearsome looking wife she was as ever I said een on, wha is it, says she, that dare say the house of Ellangowan will perish without male succession? My mistress just turned on her, she was a high-spirited woman, and I ready why an answer to a body. It's me that says it, says she, that may say it with a sad heart. Wife that the gypsy wife gripped till her hand, I ken you weel enough, said she, though ye kenna me, but as sure as that sun's in heaven, and as sure as that water's rinnang to the sea, and as sure as there's an ee that sees, and an ear that hears us baith, Harry Bertram, that was thought to perish at Warwick Point, never did die there, he was to have a weary weird, asterisk cruel fate, till his 21th year. That was I said o' him, but if ye live and I live, ye'll hear mair o' him this winter before the snaw lies twa days on the dun of Singleside. I want none o' your siller, she said, to make ye think I am blearing, asterisk moistening, your fair ye will till after Martymas, and there she left us standing. Was she a very tall woman? Interrupted Mannering. Had she black hair, black eyes, and a cut above the brow? Added the lawyer. She was the tallest woman I ever saw, and her hair was as black as midnight, unless where it was grey, and she had a scar abune the brow, that ye might hae laid the lith, asterisk joint, of your finger in. Naebody that's seen her will ever forget her, and I am morally sure that it was on the ground o' what that gypsy woman said that my mistress made her will, having ta'en a dislike at the young leddy o' Ellangowan, and she liked her far war after she was obliged to send her 20 elf, for she said, Miss Bertram, no content why letting the Ellangowan property pass into strange hands, owing to her being a lass and no a lad, was coming, by her poverty, to be a burden and a disgrace to Singleside too. But I hope my mistresses is a good will for a that, for it would be hard in me to lose the wee bit legacy I served for little fee in Bounteth, will I what? The counsellor relieved her fears on this head, then inquired after Jenny Gibson, and understood she had accepted Mr. Dinmont's offer, and I have done sae missile too, since he was sae discreet as to ask me, said Mrs. Rebecca. They are very decent folk the Dinmonts, though my lady didna doubt a hear muckle about the friends on that side the house. But she liked the Charlie's Hope hams, and the cheeses, and the muirfowl, that they were I sending, and the lamb's wool hose and mittens, she liked them weel enough. Mr. Playdell now dismissed Mrs. Rebecca. When she was gone, I think I know the gypsy woman, said the lawyer. I was just going to say the same, replied Mannering. And her name, said Playdell, is Meg Merrilees, answered the colonel. "Are you avist of that?" said the counselor, looking at his military friend with a comic expression of surprise. Mannering answered that he had known such a woman when he was at Ellangowan upwards of 20 years before, and then made his learned friend acquainted with all the remarkable particulars of his first visit there. Mr. Playdell listened with great attention, and then replied, "I congratulated myself upon having made the acquaintance of a profound theologian in your chaplain, but I really did not expect to find a pupil of Albumazer or Messabala in his patron. I have a notion, however, this gypsy could tell us some more of the matter than she derives from astrology or second sight. I had her through hands once, and could then make little of her, but I must write to Macmorland to stir heaven and earth to find her out. I will gladly come to Shire myself to assist at her examination. I am still in the commission of the peace there, though I have ceased to be sheriff. I never had anything more at heart in my life than tracing that murder, and the fate of the child. I must write to the sheriff of Roxburghshire too, and to an active justice of peace in Cumberland. I hope when you come to the country you will make Woodbourne your headquarters?" "Certainly. I was afraid you were going to forbid me, but we must go to breakfast now, or I shall be too late." On the following day the new friends parted, and the colonel rejoined his family without any adventure worthy of being detailed in these chapters.